The year is 2023. The room is quiet. Fluorescent lights hum over a county extension office meeting room. The air smells of stale coffee and clean linoleum. A young woman stands at a podium. Her name is Dr. Eris Thorne. She's a soil scientist from the State University. On the screen behind her is a satellite map of the valley. It's a patchwork of green and brown squares. She clicks a button. The map changes. Now it shows soil moisture retention. Most of the valley is yellow. Some patches are pale green. One parcel, a small rectangle near a winding creek, glows. It glows a deep, vibrant emerald, an impossible color. Dr. Thorne points to it. That 120-acre section, she says, is an anomaly. It holds water like a sponge in a desert. Its organic matter is 4 times the county average. During the drought of 2012, its corn yield was 35% higher than irrigated fields. During the flood of 2017, it didn't lose a single inch of topsoil. It is, by every metric we have, the most productive, most resilient piece of agricultural land in the entire state. She pauses. We call it the Miller anomaly. In the back of the room, an old man sits very still. His name is Frank Gable. He was a realtor in this valley for 40 years. He knows every parcel by heart. He knows the Miller place. He especially knows that glowing green rectangle. He remembers standing on that land in 1982. It was a swamp in the spring. It was cracked clay in the summer. He remembers a young man, barely 22 years old, named Sam Miller. A young man who had just lost his father. A young man drowning in debt. Frank remembers the advice he gave. The kind, gentle, fatherly advice. Sell it, son. Sell that bottom land before it gets any worse. It's a liability, a weight around your neck. Frank had been so sure, so certain. He looks at the glowing green map. He looks at the data on the screen. Highest yield, highest resilience, highest value. He feels something he can't quite name. It isn't regret. It's the quiet, hollow shock of a lifetime of certainty dissolving in a single moment. This is the kind of story we tell on this channel. The stories that don't make the news, the quiet battles fought over decades, the ones about people who were told they couldn't, the ones who listened politely and then went and did it anyway. If you believe these stories of resilience and quiet determination deserve to be told, take a moment to subscribe. Because the story of how that worthless swamp became the most valuable land in the valley is a story about more than just dirt. It's a story about what grows in a place everyone else has written off. Let's go back. The year is 1982. Interest rates were scraping the sky. 18%, 20%. Commodity prices were in the gutter. Farmers were losing their land that had been in their families for 100 years. It was a quiet, brutal hollowing out of rural America. And in the middle of it all was Sam Miller. He was 22. His father, Big Sam, had died 3 months earlier. A heart attack while mending a fence. Sudden. Final. He left behind a wife, a son, and a 300-acre farm. He also left behind a banknote, a big one. The farm was mostly good upland soil, rich, dark loam that could grow anything. But it also included a piece of land the family just called the Bottoms. 120 acres that followed the lazy curve of Willow Creek. Every spring, the creek would swell with snowmelt. It would jump its banks and turn the bottoms into a muddy lake. Every summer, the sun would bake that mud into something resembling concrete. It was useless land. Worse than useless. It was a tax bill, a liability. Big Sam had always had plans for it, never got around to them. He had a saying. He'd look out over the fields, his hands on his hips. The dirt is enough, he'd say. But now, staring at foreclosure notices, Sam wasn't so sure. The bank manager was a decent man, but he was nervous. He suggested Sam talk to a professional, get the farm appraised, maybe sell off a piece to solidify his position. So Sam called Frank Gable, the best realtor in the county. Frank wasn't just a salesman. He was a fixture, a deacon at the Presbyterian church. He'd sponsored the same Little League team for 20 years. Frank Gable was a man whose word was trusted. He'd known Sam's father for decades. He agreed to come out. He pulled up in his clean Buick sedan. A man in his late 50s. Kind eyes. A firm handshake. He walked the property with Sam. He kicked at the dirt on the high ground. "Good soil," he said. "Your father took care of this land." He praised the condition of the barns, the straightness of the fence lines. Then they walked down the slope to the bottoms. It was late fall. The ground was a mess of tangled weeds and cracked mud. A few skeletal trees stood in the lowest spots. Frank stood there for a long time. He didn't say anything. He just looked. Sam waited. The silence felt heavy. Finally, Frank turned to him. "Sam," he said, his voice gentle, "I've been selling land in this valley for 30 years. I know every parcel like the back of my hand. This," he said, gesturing to the 120 acres, "this is a drag on your whole operation. It's an anchor. It actively lowers the value of the good land." Sam felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He'd known it was bad. He hadn't known it was that bad. Frank put a hand on his shoulder. It was a fatherly gesture. "My advice to you, as a friend of your dad's, sever it. Sell it off for whatever you can get. Maybe a duck hunting club will take it for a few hundred an acre. Take that cash, whatever it is, and pay down the note on the good land. Get the bank off your back. Solidify your position." He made it sound so reasonable, so logical, so smart. Sam looked out at the tangled mess. "My father never sold an acre," he said quietly. Frank sighed. A soft, sympathetic sound. "Your father was a different kind of farmer, Sam. He was farming in a different time. Interest rates weren't 20%. The world has changed. You have to be practical now. I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm trying to protect you, son. That land floods. The creek is unstable. It's eating away at the bank every year. Sell it before it gets worse, before you lose another 5 acres to the water." Frank wasn't a villain. He wasn't a predator. He was a good man, giving what he believed was good advice. He was certain he was right. He was absolutely 100% certain. And that certainty was a heavier weight than any bank loan. It was the certainty of a respected elder, the certainty of experience, the certainty of logic. How do you argue with that? How do you fight against someone who genuinely believes they are helping you? Sam didn't have an answer. He just nodded. He thanked Frank for his time. He walked him back to his Buick. As Frank drove away, spitting gravel, Sam stood there. He looked at the good fields his father had nurtured. Then he looked down at the bottoms. A worthless, ugly piece of the earth. A liability. An anchor. He felt the weight of Frank's certainty settle on him. A cold, heavy blanket. That night, Sam sat at the old oak table in the kitchen. The house was silent. His mother was asleep. The foreclosure notices were in a pile on the counter. He felt like he was suffocating. Frank's advice echoed in his head. Practical, logical, the only way. He got up and went to his father's old roll-top desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out the farm ledgers. Years and years of them. His father's neat, blocky handwriting filling every page. Seed costs, fuel expenses, yields, rainfall totals. A life recorded in numbers. Sam paged through the most recent one, his father's last year. Tucked inside the back cover was a folded piece of paper, a note, written in pencil. Sam unfolded it. It wasn't a letter. It was just a few sentences. His father's voice, clear as if he were in the room. They can take the crop, they can take the equipment, they can even take the house, but they can't take the dirt. As long as you have the dirt, you can start over. The dirt is enough. Sam read it again and again. He closed his eyes. He saw his father's hands, calloused, stained with grease and soil, strong hands. He thought about Frank Gable's soft, clean hands, his reasonable voice, his certainty. And in that quiet kitchen, a different kind of certainty began to form in Sam's gut. It wasn't logical. It wasn't practical. It was something older, something deeper. He folded the note and put it in his wallet. He walked back to the kitchen table. He took the pile of foreclosure notices and put them in a drawer. He would deal with them, but not by selling, not by cutting off a piece of the farm to save the rest. He was going to make it whole. He was going to make the dirt enough. All of it. Especially the part everyone said was worthless. The next morning he called the bank. He spoke to the manager. He told him he wasn't selling. He told him he had a plan for the bottoms. He asked for 6 months, just 6 months of forbearance. The banker was skeptical. What kind of plan? I'm going to fix the water problem, Sam said. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. The banker knew that land. Everyone did. Fixing it seemed impossible. But he'd known Big Sam. He'd respected him. He heard the echo of the father in the son's voice. Not arrogance, just quiet determination. All right, Sam, the banker said. 6 months. That's all I can give you. Sam hung up the phone. 6 months. He went to the library. He spent days looking at old county survey maps. Maps from the 1950s, the 1930s, even one from 1890. He traced the path of Willow Creek on each one. He saw it. The creek hadn't always been where it was now. Over the years, as farmers cleared land upstream, the water flowed faster. It had straightened its own course. It had cut a deeper, narrower channel. It had become a fire hose, scouring the land during floods instead of nourishing it. The problem wasn't the water. It was the speed of the water. He knew what he had to do. He had to slow it down. He started with hand tools, a shovel, an axe, a wheelbarrow. He went down into the bottoms. He found fallen trees and dragged them into the creek bed. He piled rocks against them. He wasn't trying to build a dam. He was building a speed bump, something to make the water pause, to make it drop its load of rich silt. His neighbors saw him. They'd slow their pickups as they drove by on the county road. They'd shake their heads. Miller's boy has lost his mind. He's out there playing with sticks and rocks. Sam ignored them. He worked from sunup to sundown. His hands blistered, then calloused over. He was making progress, but it was too slow. He needed a machine. He couldn't get a loan, not for a project like this. So he sold his father's new pickup truck. It was the only thing of value he had that wasn't tied to the farm. He took the money, cash. He drove 3 counties over to a farm auction. He walked past the shiny new tractors. He went to the back row, the junk row, and there it was. A 1958 Caterpillar D6 bulldozer. It was a rust-pitted monster, leaking oil from every seal. But the engine turned over. The tracks were worn but intact. He bought it for $5,000, cash. He spent the next 2 weeks in the workshop, taking the engine apart and putting it back together. He used his father's old tools. He replaced gaskets he made himself from sheets of cork. He welded the cracks in the hydraulic lines. Finally, one cold morning, it fired up. A cloud of black smoke billowed out of the stack. The noise was deafening. To Sam, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. For the next 2 years, that old bulldozer was his only partner. He didn't fight the land. He read it. He learned its contours. He started at the top of the watershed, just below his property line. He used the D6 to carve long, shallow channels into the land. Swales. They followed the contour lines of the terrain perfectly. They weren't ditches to drain water away. They were basins to hold it, to let the rain walk, not run, across the land, to let it sink deep into the soil. He built dozens of them, one below the other, a terraced system of passive water harvesting. Then he went to the creek itself. He pushed earth into wide, gentle berms. He didn't narrow the channel, he widened it. He gave the creek a floodplain again, a place for the water to spread out, slow down, and drop its sediment. He worked every day, through the mud of spring, through the humid heat of summer. He moved thousands of tons of earth, one bucket load at a time. He was reshaping the land, not to his will, but to the will of the water. He was listening to the dirt and doing what it asked. The community was split. Most people thought he was crazy. They'd gather at the co-op for coffee in the mornings. They'd talk about Sam Miller. He's wasting his time, one would say, and his fuel. Can you imagine the fuel that old cat burns? Another would chime in. He should have just put in pattern tiling like a normal person. Get the water off the land, not invite it to stay. That's the modern way, the right way. Their certainty was thick in the air, mixed with the smell of roasted coffee and diesel exhaust. It was the certainty of convention, the certainty of the way things are done. But there were a few old-timers, men in their 70s and 80s. They'd watch Sam from the road, too, but they didn't shake their heads. They nodded, slowly. One of them was a neighbor named Henry Gable, Frank Gable's older brother, a retired farmer. One afternoon, Henry pulled his truck into Sam's driveway. He got out holding a big silver thermos. He walked down into the bottoms where Sam was working. Sam shut down the D6. The sudden silence was ringing. Henry handed him a cup of coffee. It was hot and black. "My grandfather used to do something like this," Henry said, looking at the long, curving swales. Not with a machine, of course, with mules and a slip scraper. He had a name for it, called it making the water walk. Sam took a sip of coffee. He didn't say anything. Henry pointed the cup toward the new floodplain. Everyone today wants to fight the water, build higher levees, dig deeper ditches. They think they can win. He chuckled. Granddad always said fighting the creek is like trying to fight your own shadow. You just get tired. Better to dance with it. Henry finished his coffee. He looked at Sam. "A lot of folks think you're a fool, son. You know that, right?" Sam nodded. Henry clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't you pay them any mind. You're the first man in this valley in 50 years who's actually listening to the land." Henry walked back to his truck. He didn't offer to help. He didn't offer any more advice. He just offered a cup of coffee, and the knowledge that Sam wasn't completely alone. It was enough. Have you ever had to do that? Have you ever had to ignore the loud chorus of good advice to follow a quiet feeling you couldn't quite explain? A certainty in your gut that went against all the available evidence. It's a lonely place to be. Tell us about it in the comments below, because what happened next on Sam Miller's farm is a testament to the power of that quiet, stubborn inner voice. The first test came in the spring of 1985. It was a big flood. A late snowmelt combined with 3 inches of warm rain. Willow Creek turned into a monster. It tore through the valley. Sam's neighbors watched in horror as brown water sheeted across their fields, carrying their precious topsoil with it. Levees broke. Ditches failed. Sam stood on the hill above the bottoms and watched. The water came. It filled the wide floodplain he had built for it. It spread out. It slowed down. It wasn't angry and brown anymore. It was calm and murky. It crept up into the swales, filling them one by one. It stayed for 3 days. And then it receded. When it was gone, Sam walked the land. His neighbors' fields were scarred with gullies. Their fences were buried in debris. Sam's bottoms were covered in a new layer of dark, rich silt, half an inch thick in some places. The flood hadn't stolen from him. It had given him a gift. It was working. The second test came in the summer of 1988, a brutal, relentless drought. The sky was a pale, hazy blue for weeks on end. Cornfields across the valley turned a sickly yellow-brown. The leaves curled up, trying to protect themselves. The ground cracked open in great fissures. Farmers with irrigation ran their pumps day and night, but it wasn't enough. The water table was dropping. Sam didn't have irrigation on the bottoms. He didn't need it. The swales had done their job. The soil was a deep reservoir of moisture. While his neighbor's corn withered, his stayed a deep, healthy green. That fall, the county average for corn was 90 bushels to the acre. Sam's yield from the bottoms was 130. He used the profits to make a final payment on the original bank loan. The farm was his, free and clear. The decades started to stack up, each one a new verse in the same song. 1990. A neighbor was retiring. He offered Sam 40 acres adjoining the bottoms. Sam bought it. Cash. 1995. Sam's old D6 was finally giving up the ghost. He drove to the John Deere dealership. He bought a brand new 7800 tractor with a front-end loader. He wrote a check for the full amount. Cash. The salesman was stunned. He'd never seen anyone do that before. One day, Frank Gable was driving out to show a property on the far side of the valley. It was late August, the time of year when things start to look tired. As it passed the Miller place, something caught his eye. A slash of vibrant green. It was the bottoms. It looked like a patch of Ireland dropped into the sun-baked Indiana landscape. Frank slowed his Buick. He pulled over to the shoulder. He just stared. It didn't make sense. It shouldn't look like that. Not that piece of land. He remembered the tangled weeds and cracked mud. He remembered his own certain advice. Sell it before it gets worse. He put the car in drive and pulled away, a strange, unsettled feeling in his chest. 2,000. The farm on the other side of Willow Creek came up for sale. 80 acres. Sam bought it. Cash. He was now farming both sides of the creek. His creek. 2005. He used the D6 one last time. He dug a series of 3 shallow ponds in the lowest part of the bottoms. They filled naturally with the high water table. He installed a small solar-powered pump. It pushed water from the ponds up to his original upland fields. The worthless land was now irrigating the good land. The liability had become the engine. 2012. Another drought, worse than '88. The governor declared a state of emergency. Half the farmers in the county applied for federal disaster relief. Their crops were a total loss. Sam Miller had his best year ever. His yields were double the county average. He had so much hay he didn't know what to do with it. He sold it to his struggling neighbors, at half the market price. He didn't say a word about the past. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just helped. That winter, he bought another 160 acres. The farm was now over 600 acres, and the heart of it, the most productive, most reliable part of the entire operation, was the 120-acre piece of swamp he was told to sell for scrap. The year is 2015, a Tuesday morning in October. Sam is at the Crossroads Diner. It's the place all the old farmers go for coffee. He's sitting in a booth by himself reading the paper. The bell over the door jingles. Frank Gable walks in. Frank is 81 years old now, retired for more than a decade. He moves slowly with a slight stoop. He sees Sam. He pauses. He's seen Sam around town for years, of course. They'd nod, say hello, but they never really talked. Not since that day in 1982. For 33 years, a quiet space had existed between them, a space filled with unspoken words. Frank decides right then that it's time to cross it. He walks over to Sam's booth. "Sam," he says, "mind if I join you?" Sam looks up from his paper. He sees the old Realtor. He nods toward the seat opposite him. "Go ahead, Frank." Frank slides into the booth. It groans under his weight. A waitress comes over. Frank orders a coffee. They sit in silence for a moment. The clatter of plates and silverware from the kitchen fills the air. Frank clears his throat. "I was thinking about you the other day, Sam. I drove past your place. It looks good. Real good." Sam just sips his coffee. Frank continues, his voice a little shaky. "What you did with that bottom land. I've been retired for a long time. I've seen a lot of things, but I've never seen anything like that." He looks down at his hands, resting on the tabletop. Soft hands, even in old age. "I wanted to tell you something. I was wrong." He looks up and meets Sam's eyes. "The advice I gave you back then, back in '82, it was the worst advice I ever gave anyone in my entire career. I was so sure I was right. I'm sorry." The apology hangs in the air. It is genuine, heartfelt. Sam looks at the old man. He sees the shame in his eyes, the deep, abiding regret, and he feels nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no triumph, just a great, quiet weariness. He takes a slow sip of his coffee. He sets the mug down gently. "You weren't wrong, Frank," he says, his voice even. "You were certain. There's a difference." Frank looks confused. "What do you mean?" Sam leans forward just a little. "Being wrong is an honest mistake. It's about facts. Being certain, that's about you. You believed you were helping me. You believed you were protecting me from a mistake. And that," he says, "is the hardest thing in the world to fight against. Not someone's hate, not someone's greed. Someone's kindness, someone's certainty that they know what's best for you. It's a cage made of good intentions, and they hand you the key and tell you it's for a house you should build somewhere else." Sam leans back. "It took me 30 years to prove a kind man wrong, Frank. That's a lonely piece of work." Frank Gable doesn't say another word. He just sits there. The weight of what Sam said settles over him. He finally understands. The damage wasn't in the advice. It was in the certainty with which it was delivered. A certainty that had dismissed a young man's potential without a second thought. A certainty that had almost cost Sam everything. And he realizes that Sam's greatest achievement wasn't reshaping the land. It was reshaping his own future, alone, against the crushing weight of a good man's help. Sam Miller didn't just build a successful farm. He built a new way of seeing the land. Word got around, first locally, then regionally. The State University's agricultural department sent a team of graduate students to study his farm. They took soil samples. They measured water infiltration rates. They wrote papers filled with academic jargon. They called his methods subsurface hydrology enhancement and Integrated Riparian Management. Sam just called it listening to the creek. He started hosting field days. At first, just a few curious neighbors showed up. Then, farmers from the next county. Soon, they were coming from Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky. Young farmers mostly. Ones who were tired of the chemical-intensive, high-input model. Ones who were looking for a different way. They'd walk the swales with Sam. He'd show them the ponds. He'd explain how he made the water walk. He never charged a dime. In 2018, he walked into the local community college. He met with the president. He established the Miller Family Grant, a $50,000 annual scholarship for students pursuing degrees in soil science or water management. He funded it himself, cash. His son, David, had gone off to Purdue to study agricultural engineering. Sam never asked him to come back to the farm. He wanted the boy to make his own way. But in 2020, David came home. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. He saw the farm not as a legacy to be maintained, but as a laboratory to be expanded. He brought new tools, drones to map soil moisture from the air, sensors to measure the water table in real time. He was combining his father's deep, intuitive knowledge with modern technology. The Miller anomaly wasn't an anomaly anymore. It was a model, a replicable system. The methods Sam Miller had developed alone, with a rusty bulldozer and a father's note, were now being taught in university classrooms. The revolution started by one man was now being seeded in a new generation. In the old workshop on the farm, things are mostly the same as they were in Big Sam's day. The same smell of grease and steel. The same collection of wrenches on the wall, outlined in faded paint. But on one wall, mounted like a trophy, is a steering wheel. It's big, made of hard, black plastic, cracked and worn smooth from countless hours of use. It's the steering wheel from the 1958 Caterpillar D6. Sometimes, David, Sam's son, will be out in the shop late at night. He'll walk over to it. He'll run his hand over the worn surface. He closes his eyes, and he tries to imagine it. His father. A young man, not much older than he is now, out there in the bottoms, alone, for years, moving dirt one bucket at a time, working against the seasons, working against the neighbor's laughter, working against the kind, certain advice of good men. He touches the cold, smooth plastic and feels the weight of all those years. The physical proof of a quiet fight. The artifact of a revolution that started with a single, stubborn belief. The dirt is enough. The most dangerous limitation is the one that is placed upon you by someone who believes they are protecting you. It doesn't come from a place of malice. It comes from a place of love, of concern, of certainty. The world is full of well-meaning people who are absolutely certain about what you can and cannot do. They will draw a map of your potential and tell you not to step outside the lines. They are not your enemies, but their certainty is. Sam Miller spent a lifetime quietly, patiently, and methodically erasing a line someone else had drawn for him. He didn't do it with angry words or grand gestures. He did it with a shovel, with a rusty machine, with decades of work that spoke for itself. He proved that the most powerful response to someone else's certainty is your own quiet, relentless action. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is being told they can't. They're being told to be realistic, to be practical, to sell off the worthless parts of themselves before they get worse. They're being told this by people who care about them. If this story reminded you of them, or if it reminded you of you, share it with them. Because sometimes, the only permission a person needs is the knowledge that it can be done. Subscribe for more stories about the quiet fighters. And let us know in the comments about a time you had to trust your own path against the certainty of others. We read every single one. and we believe they matter.